up and make us live. We are now live streaming, and welcome public to the public hearings of the Environment and Transportation Committee. I am the chair, Kumar Barve. I'm joined by my vice chair, Dana Stein, and the members of my committee. And here's the order of the bills. The first bill is House Bill 1082, Delegate Lopez, which is a bill that's jointly assigned with the Judiciary Committee. Then we go to House Bill 863, St. Mary's County Delegation. Then House Bill 1074, Delegate Watson. Next, House Bill 1098, Delegate Fisher. Next, House Bill 1114, Delegate Arentz. Next, House Bill 1117, Delegate Arentz also. Followed by House Bill 1147, Delegate Parrott. Then House Bill 1229, Delegate Lasanti, and finally House Bill 1297, Delegate Walker. And so with that, Delegate Lopez, welcome to the committee. You have 4 minutes. You'll see the timer go through 2 minutes twice. It's 2 and 2, kind of like that old TV show, The Love Connection. So you get 2 and 2. And all your witnesses get 2 minutes as well. So take it away, Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. For the record, I'm Delegate Leslie Lopez, and I'm here to ask for your support for HB 1082. This bill would permit state and local governments to use real-time digital spotters and permits the image of the violation to be used as evidence for issuing a citation. This bill also sets up a regulatory framework to ensure any new technologies balance the needs for privacy, transparency, public safety, and racial equity. Distracted driving contributes to 58% of all of the crashes in our state. Despite robust public awareness campaigns, distracted driving is nearly impossible to enforce with the way that the laws are currently drafted. Phone use from a distance is often hard to spot, and by the time an offender is pulled over, there's often no evidence of the violation because they've simply put down their phone. In broad strokes, under this bill, a digital spotter would be or could be set up in a fixed and publicly known location. If a driver were to hold the phone within the spotter's view, the camera would take a digital image and then transmit that image to an officer posted nearby. The officer could then make the decision to pull the driver over. If the officer does not issue a citation, the image would then be instantly deleted. Along with the other experts, or the experts here today, I would be happy to answer any questions about how exactly these digital spotters work, but I'd like to spend the remainder of my time explaining the regulatory framework that we're proposing. The legislation before you today is an intentional approach to reduce opportunities for racial profiling, discrimination, or other disproportionate harm regarding privacy. So in this bill, it reduces the fees associated with distracted driving dramatically, down to $25 for a first-time offense. It requires racial equity studies before any program can be deployed, in addition to a public hearing. It requires that any data not used for a citation be deleted immediately and limits what exactly the images can be used for. It requires policies to shield personally identifiable information in the images that might be captured. Also, the SHA and local departments of transportation would be involved in the procurement and regulatory oversight as well. And we're also asking, or requiring rather, law enforcement departments to frequently report back demographic data so that the General Assembly can monitor how this technology is being used. Colleagues, distracted driving is a deadly issue, as you know. Reading a text can take your eyes off the road for 5 seconds. And at 55 miles per hour, that's like driving the entire length of a football field with your eyes closed. On average, more than 180 Marylanders die every year from distracted driving crashes, and more than 27,000 are injured. These deaths are entirely preventable. So I thank you for your time, and I urge your support.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to go through all of your witnesses, and then we'll entertain questions. Your witnesses in favor are David Helms, Councilmember Tom Hucker, Jack Matthews, Miriam Schoenbaum, John Pica. I believe that's all the folks who wish to testify. So let's start with David Helms. Mr. Helms, are you in the house?
I'm with you, sir.
Okay, we can see you and hear you. Please proceed. You have 2 minutes. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Chair Barvet and committee members. My name is David Helms. I support HB 1082. I support HB 1082. First and foremost, a friend, colleague was killed in July. He was a Master Sergeant in the Air National Guard, Maryland. I knew him for many years. He worked at the Baltimore airport as a weather team lead there. He's a good man. He stopped to lend assistance to a fellow motorist as soon as he opened his door to try and lend assistance to the crash that had occurred. He was hit and killed. So I feel strongly about this bill. Why should you consider this bill and approve this bill? Because, as Delegate Lopez says, there's an incredible amount of distracted driving. It's really hundreds of fatalities, tens of thousands of injuries, and really $1 billion of cost per year annually in Maryland alone. No amount of engineering is going to stop people looking at their phones. No amount of education is going to be effective without enforcement. I encourage you to support this bill because it's obviously will reduce reduce fatalities and injuries. We're a Vision Zero state. Because you'll be helping to enforce existing laws, because it'll improve enforcement consistency and objectivity, and because law enforcement accountability and transparency is built into the law. It's really a good law, and it really promotes equity and racial justice. So, in amending the transportation statute to allow jurisdictions to use a camera-based spotter tool, high visibility enforcement campaigns will have built-in equity, privacy protections, and a complement to education, which will save lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is my good friend, Councilmember Tom Hucker anywhere around? No? Okay, so let's go to Jack Matthews.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barvet and members of the committee. My name is Jack Matthews. I'm here in support of House Bill 1082. While I don't have any prepared testimony for you, I'm here to answer any questions that you have, reference the technology that would be used to do this. So I don't know if you want to ask questions now.
So no, we'll ask questions at the end. So you're basically here as a resource.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Well, then in that case, Mr. Matthews, just sit tight and we'll go to Miriam Schoenbaum. Miriam? Are you with us? Okay, we'll skip over her for a moment. I do see John Pica. John, you're here with us, I know. You got 2 minutes. Welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and thank you to Delegate Lopez for introducing this bill. There are different types of technology that have been that are on the market that would allow governments and law enforcement agencies to enforce these laws. This particular bill addresses only one of those technologies. There is a Senate bill that is in judicial proceedings. It is Senate Bill 179, introduced by Senator Klossmeyer, and that bill addresses the other technology. So I know that I've been working with the people at who represent this company with this bill, and we were hoping initially to get one bill, but we just ran out of time, and so there are two bills. They're not competing bills. It would give, if both bills are amended into the other, it would give counties the opportunity to decide whether they want a mobile device or a fixed device. This technology is a fixed device, although it does state in the bill that it can be mobile as well. One bill uses this technology in this bill uses artificial intelligence. The other bill uses a video streaming device, which would capture an image of a person actually talking on the phone. The bill requires that all the identity of individuals be scrubbed. Both of these bills address a very serious issue. About 32 or 33% of all accidents are caused by distracted driving. And I've talked to the people at Shock Trauma. Over 1/3 of their victims are victims of traffic accidents. So I'm hoping that you look at I don't know why the fines are reduced. I think the fines should remain the same. A $25 fine will not really deter anybody. I think the fines should remain what they are. Yes, sir.
If you could wrap up, sir, that the committee would appreciate that, I think.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I've concluded my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions. JPR is going to wait until this bill is heard, and they have stated that they're going to include both. If the bill is going to pass,
Okay.
they're going to include both technologies. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Is Councilmember Tom Hucker anywhere around? Okay. How about Miriam Schoenbaum? Are you around? No? Okay, we'll proceed to since I think everybody who wants to speak has had a chance to. The first question goes to Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Delegate Lopez. Happy to have you in committee. Quick question. Could the gentleman, I guess, Mr. Matthews, talk to us a little bit about the technology? As I read the bill, it sounds like it's some sort of infrared, or you're taking a picture of the person inside the car. Can you explain that to us a little bit more?
Yeah, the way the technology works is it's a camera system that is set up, and it takes a photograph of not necessarily the person in the car. It shoots down in through the windshield and catches them holding the phone in their hand, whether it's up above the dash line or below the dash line. We know that a lot of the instances of people texting and driving has gone down below the dash line. And then that image is transmitted downstream to an officer that's waiting, and that officer can make the determination whether they're going to pull that vehicle over and issue a citation.
Okay, so it goes in through the windshield. Part of the code that it also captures has to do with whether people are wearing their seatbelt. So then would it just be those folks in the front seat, or would it also be capturing the folks in the back seat?
It only in the front, because the system has to be able to shoot through the windshield the way it's designed right now.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, one more question, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
Delegate Lopez, I do appreciate the things that you've put in to protect privacy. It'll come as no surprise to anybody on this committee or to you, because I mentioned it to you, my extreme concern about this bill and privacy. One thing that you mentioned that I'm curious about, you said that all identifying information will be redacted, and you also said that they have to report demographic data. So can you explain to me how that would work?
Sure. So the way that the camera is positioned, it won't show anyone's face. And I think we can provide you, if it wasn't put in the written testimony, kind of samples of what these photos look. So you can see people's hands, because that's how you tell if an offense is being committed, right? So that initiates the camera sending the image to the officer approaches the car. When an officer issues a citation, one of the things that they do is they mark one of 5 racial or ethnic categories for the citation that's issued. So the demographic data would be about the citations that are issued and not the people that are captured, or the images of them would be captured.
But how can they report the demographic data if all identifying things have been redacted? Are they doing that before?
It's the demographic or any type of personally identifiable information in the photo is redacted. So if you have like if there's a citation that's issued and someone has a shirt that says like the name of their high school or something like that, that's a personally identifiable thing. So that would be redacted from how the image is saved. But unless there's a citation issue, none of these images would be saved. It's only because you need that image as a form of evidence for the citation. when a citation is issued, that's when a demographic information comes into play.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Sure. And also
Okay.
just
Next question goes to Delegate Ampry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Delegate Lopez. I'm appreciative of the bill's approach to understanding that there is a possible equity issue with how these things can be these citations can be distributed. The question I'm asking here and what I'm concerned about is, so the picture is taken and it's sent to a police officer nearby, and then the police officer has a discretion on whether or not to pursue the person who is in possible violation. Where my concern lies is that we know that through the data that we have on policing in America, we know that no group of people has more propensity to commit crimes or do things, but we know areas that are over-policed are going to be overly fined, overly arrested. So my concern is, even in our efforts here to make sure this is equitable, I'm trying to understand, we have counties and districts where they have way fewer police, but the counties and districts that have more people of color are often over-policed. So my worry is that even if we have, the numbers might say that they didn't pull over as many people, or the percentages might be equal, but the over-policing is my concern. And that by taking pictures, we're going to have, even if only 10% of the police stop people in a PG county, in a Prince George's County or in Baltimore City, that's still going to be significantly more people of color. So I'm trying to understand what mechanism do you think you could put in here, or what made you feel like that was the best way to do it, to have it where you take a picture and the police has the discretion?
Sure, absolutely. So there's a couple things. One is that in order to put any spotter up, there has to be a very transparent process. And so the bill requires a public hearing and public participation, and then also racial equity studies that are made public. So that way it's clear that these spotters are not being placed in these cameras or spotters are not being placed in communities of color or communities where there might be might lend themselves to some type of discrimination, right? On the back end, there's the demographic data that's being reported, and it's important that that data is public and also reported to the General Assembly as opposed to just the county officials, because we know sometimes that county law enforcement is not friendly. I serve on the Judiciary Committee, and there's a wide range of testimony that we hear from progressive sheriffs like Sheriff Popkin in Montgomery County, and then from some of the more rural districts. They just have a different culture around policing there. So there's that part. The other thing is that with an image, the ambiguity around traffic stops has a little bit more clarity, right? As a member of the Judiciary Committee and someone who's on the subcommittee for police reform, I've sat through quite a few hearings that talk about where the issues occur in policing, particularly around traffic law enforcement. And it seems like there's two concentrations. The first is on an ambiguous basis for a stop, right? The other is on the situation escalating and not having an officer conducting himself or herself in a way that helps de-escalate the situation, and that problems happen there, right? So in this scenario, there's a photo that the spotter can tell you with 100% accuracy whether you are holding the phone while you are driving or you are not. So right now, as the law stands, an officer can just kind of think he saw you with a cell phone in your hand and stop you. And the fines are high, so there's already a tension that's inherently in there. I think just adding cameras is not a great approach. It has to be done in a way where there's lots of restrictions and guardrails to make sure that privacy on the front end is maintained, privacy of what happens with your data is maintained, and that there's a clear process without any ambiguity. So that's been my approach. There's an amendment to this bill that moves, and there's two mentioning of Department of State Police in the topic of like procurement and placement. We move that to the Maryland Standards and Training Commission, which is an area of policing that's undergoing a lot of thoughtful reevaluation, because it's how you train law enforcement officers to do these traffic stops. And racial equity and implicit bias is all part of that conversation.
Yes, thank you. I'm just, I appreciate your answer, and I again, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that goes behind enforcing, creating laws like this. I'm just still a bit concerned that that there's still the possibility that we're going to have a situation where a community might want to have the camera because they want to be safe, but at the same time, the over-policing that's already present in the nearby community might create a situation where you're going to have a disproportionate amount of people of color paying these fines. And we've seen that problem across the country on how.
Delegate Ampry.
So I'm just trying to figure out how to do that well.
Yeah, Delegate Ampry, there's a little rule we have in this committee that it's like Jeopardy. It has to be in the form of a question.
Yeah, so so my question is, I'm just how do you avoid a community getting more of these fines than other communities if the policing is heavily there? I still don't feel like I'm getting to the answer there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, this is enabling legislation. So not every local jurisdiction is compelled to do this.
Right.
There are some that seem to be more enthusiastic than others. And, I hear you about having any type of increased enforcement feeling as though it's going to be disproportionate, because history tells us that is the case, right? But in this instance, there's a clear basis for a stop, or there isn't. So right now there's ambiguity, and that will lead to problems. But in order to have any type of enforcement that works and reform on that, there has to be a specific thing that's pinpointed. So I'm hopeful that this legislation will be able to do that, and do that in a way where we're not allowing for any porous data to escape.
Okay, let's move on here. I have 3 other people who want to ask questions. The next is Delegate Griffith, followed by Terraza and Healy, in that order. Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello to my good friend and fellow delegate on the Public Safety Subcommittee. A couple of questions, actually following up on the previous delegate's comments. So this picture would work as probable cause, and then would send it to the police officer and give them probable cause to pull over the individual just for this offense? Yes. So at that point, the police officer has complete discretion whether or not to follow through and set probable cause.
Yes. So the way the technology works, and I do have to say I have not talked to Mr. Pica about this. There's I think probably like 5 or so different vendors, and the bill is written to be as broad as possible to include all of those technologies. But the kind of center of the Venn diagrams for how all of these things works is that a photo is taken, and there's no storage connected to the source of that photo. The photo doesn't go anywhere, but it will scan it, and using AI, it will determine with a certain percentage or so if that person is likely holding a phone in their hand or not, and doing it in a way that violates the law. And so you can set it to whatever percentage you want. You can do it to 50% likelihood that someone is breaking the law, or 100%, or whatever it might be. And I'm open to amendments to clarify that if people are interested in going that route. But once the camera determines that you are holding a phone in your hand, it's then transmitted to a law enforcement officer who reviews it and decides, like, okay, that guy was taking a drink of a Coke can or something, and I'm not going to stop him. Or, oh, that person is clearly using their cell phone while driving.
And what's in the picture? Is the picture of the image of the entire individual, or just of the phone being up?
I can send your offices what the variety of photos, but essentially it's about an 18-inch span between the top of your dashboard and like where the seatbelt might be.
Delegate Lopez, let me see if I can help with this. So I'm the driver. I'm irresponsibly talking on my cell phone like this. So is this what the camera would see?
It could if you position the camera to include your face, but studies show that people aren't really using their cell phones to their head anymore. It's usually kind of down in a position that's closer to their lap. So the camera goes more towards where the steering wheel is. But there are technologies out there that
So
can
wait a
take
minute. So would it look like this?
yeah, and it's down.
Hmm.
I feel like, yeah, if we had some photos, that might be more helpful.
Well, you know what, Mike, let me just interrupt you for a moment.
Sure.
I'll floor back again. Mr. Matthews, what's it going to look like? Do you have a cell phone with you? Can you demonstrate what this would look like?
Yeah, I can just, I'll describe it and then show you. Basically, the camera is looking down. It's steep. It's up high. It's about right around 20 feet high, and it's looking down into the windshield, and it's penetrating using infrared flash. It's penetrating the windshield, so it's looking like what you just showed right there. So
Like
it's
this?
capturing.
So like something like this?
Yes. So what it's doing is shooting between a certain section of the windshield, looking for the steering wheel, and then it's capturing the way that your hand is. So looking at me, I got to move my tablet here a little bit. It would be capturing something like this. Okay, and in the images, the person's face is not seen. It's usually from the neck down and into the lap, so it can see if the hand is in the lap with the cell phone. It can see if the seat belt is buckled. It does have the there is another camera that can be added to shoot straight into the windshield to see if they're holding it up to their face, but however you want the technology used is how you draft it into the legislation.
Delegate Griffith, if you'll indulge me, I'll give you the floor.
Sure.
In a second. But so before, so a lot of people have devices that attach their cell phone to the dashboard in some way so that they can, get directions from Google Maps or whatever. And that's not illegal under Maryland law. So I'm driving and I've got this phone that's sitting on my dashboard, sort of in this kind of a configuration. Would it catch that?
It would. However, as you know, I'm sure the committee knows this. If you're turning on or ending a phone call, that's legally permissible. But if you're holding it and like scrolling through something, that's against the law. That is considered distracted driving. So
okay,
it really.
Let me. Okay, I understand. Delegate Griffith, you can continue, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and you got most of my thoughts kind of out there, so I appreciate that. My final question about the bill is, one of the things, and obviously there are concerns about something so invasive being a right for probable cause, which leads to a traffic stop and all the things that go along with that we've discussed so much in our committee. My concern is that when you have such small fines, $25 and $50 for subsequent offenses, if someone gets pulled over and written a ticket for this, the fine is so low that individuals, and especially low-income individuals, will have to make a decision: do I take off work and fight this, or especially in a probable cause type offense, or do I just suck it up, pay the fine, and go to work? Are there any concerns about the cost-benefit analysis of someone, especially low-income folks, having to pay this fine or take off work to fight the fine?
Yeah, I mean, currently the fine is $75 for a first offense or $175 for a second offense. So to me, 25, a max of 25 or 50 sounds a heck of a lot better. And also, I think it just decreases the tension that might be in a traffic stop. It just lowers the stakes. I know that you come from a law enforcement background, so you might have a different perspective on this than I do, but I don't usually see traffic stops as being friendly. And so even if I'm stopped by an officer and it's for a $25 offense, I probably will not do that again because of that interaction with the officer. I don't think that the fine in this case needs to be higher, and it is a very intentional effort to decrease those fines. I also want to be really clear that you know, the amount of people who will be charged with this will probably increase because now there actually is a more structured basis for the stop, but this shouldn't be considered a money grab, you know, and it just really is about enforcement.
Well, Delegate Lopez, I agree with you 100%. As former law enforcement, every traffic stop we take very seriously, and we were always concerned every traffic stop could escalate into something more serious. And so my concern is initiating traffic stops over something that's potentially invasive and very minor that could potentially escalate into more serious traffic stops is something we need to be thoughtful of. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Terraza, then Delegate Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Delegate Lopez. I appreciate your concerns about distracted driving. I share those, and also sort of the concerns about the ambiguity of this offense. I do share Delegate Love's concerns, though, about some of the privacy issues. And so I have a couple of questions around that, but really quickly first, who's the public hearing before that you keep talking about? And I apologize, I don't have the bill in front of me because only the internet on my phone is working right now.
Sure. So the way it works when like any type of new like speed camera program is put in place, there's a public hearing. And it's done whatever local jurisdiction is trying to implement the program. So it would be if Howard County, for example, was going to start this program, it would be your county council and the Department of Transportation there who would hold that public hearing. We're adding on additional. Yeah, we're adding on additional requirements and also saying there needs to be a racial equity study and that all of these things need to be transparent so that communities know where they have a say in where they're being placed. And they're not being placed in like residential areas. It's really about, you know, highway safety.
Okay. And then, so then in terms of the privacy issues, what else could be seen in this? And can that be enforced? So for example, I forget the gentleman's name who just mentioned that you could see that your seatbelt was off. Can that be enforced this way? And what keeps that from being enforced this way? What if they saw other substances or other?
You know, Delegate Terraza, let me interrupt and say that I think we'll have to ask our council to see if our current seatbelt law can be enforced in this way. I think, you know, I think we'd have to get a legal interpretation. Yeah. We'd have to pass on the law.
No, and I appreciate that, but what about other things? I'm worried about being used as used for the ability if they see anything else. So maybe seatbelt laws were not the best example, but if you see something they think is drugs or they think is or something else.
Sure. No, I understand those concerns. And the way the bill is currently drafted, it's just for distracted driving. But if it helps provide some more comfort in terms of it being tailored, I would be open to an amendment saying like, you know, exclusively for distracted driving, no other basis or something to that effect. But the way that it's crafted, it's that these spotters would be used for the purpose of distracted driving.
Okay. I guess it would be sort of hard to unsee that, I would assume, for an officer, what they see. And I mean, I guess it wouldn't be probable cause to pull them over, but I am a little concerned about that.
Yeah.
But
I mean, they'd only see the image if they were holding a cell phone in their hand. Like the image wouldn't be sent to an officer unless there was a confirmed distracted driving. It's not, the officer doesn't see into everyone's car. It's only the ones that the spotter has identified as as holding a cell phone in your hand.
And it's only a cell phone, so it couldn't be something else in their hands?
No, I mean, the way the AI works, it has to say exactly what percentage of certainty a cell phone is in your hand. And cell phones are uniform size, or mobile smartphones are kind of a uniform size. So that's how the technology works.
I mean, could it be a sandwich? I mean, a sandwich might be the same.
If it was a iPhone shaped sandwich, you might get like a 25% likelihood that it's a cell phone or something like that. But the image doesn't go to an officer unless it's a confirmed you have a cell phone in your hand.
To whatever percentage. And I guess the other concern I have is like the percentage. They could set it at 2% or 3%. I mean, that's another.
Yeah, I mean, because this bill is intended to be addressing all the forms of technology that are out there, and knowing that this is a direction that other places are going, it's not written to be specific to any type of technology, and that's why we didn't put like it has to be X percentage or something like that. But I'm open to amendments about how to get at that and how to tailor it
Okay.
a little bit more precisely. Sure.
Thanks. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Delegate Healy, then Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Lopez, for a very thoughtful bill. I just wanted to ask a few questions about, again, the technology and how it works. And also, you keep talking about distracted driving, but this is really only about the current law, right? About cell phones and handheld devices.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can be distracted by eating a sandwich, or you can be distracted by, having to turn around and talk to your children in the back seat if they're fighting, and those kind of things.
Yes, you're right. It's really about
a generic kind of distracted driving. You're talking about the current law about phone.
Texting. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So I'm going back to the chairman's description of people. Sometimes they have a mounted place to put their cell phone so that they can see it and they can touch it to see what's going on their map, if they're or whatever, but they don't have it in their hand. So some of those devices are now advertised that you can put them in a cup holder, which is out of the line of sight of the dashboard. Would it pick that up if it was like down low, and it was just not in a person's hand, but down where they might push a button the same way they would if it was mounted higher up?
I mean, I think the potential is there. If it's mounted on, say, like like an air vent or something like that. But it's really the technology that I've seen is really geared towards using it in your hand. That's when a computer would pick up that you're being distracted.
Okay, that kind of is the main point of the questions that I had, because the other questions I had mostly have been answered. I have one last question, and it's about the tickets. If you get a ticket, is it you only get a ticket from a police officer? It's not mailed to your house? Is that?
Exactly. It's a citation given on the spot. It's kind of the opposite of how speed cameras work, which are very passive. There might be a sign that there's a speed camera. There usually isn't. You just kind of know that they're there.
No, it's required that there be a sign. That's the law. You have to have signage that it's photo enforced.
Perfect. Maybe I just haven't noticed them. I definitely
except in Montgomery County.
Oh, yeah. There we go. But I forgot where I was going with this.
I'm sorry. I know.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's move on to Delegate Boyce, unless you have another question. I think that was your last.
That's fine.
Ann, right?
Thank
okay.
You.
Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's so great to see you, Delegate Lopez, in the committee. I have a couple of questions, and I want to start backwards as it relates to questioning where these would place or not be placed. And if I missed it, I apologize. What are the statistics on distracted driving as it relates to the cell phone and as it relates to accidents? Is there information on there?
So we have, the information that I have seen is that 58% of collisions in Maryland involve some form of distracted driving. And the percentage of those, I don't have it committed to memory, but I can track it down for you. Of that 58%, the overwhelming majority are going to be texting or using your cell phone.
Okay,
Because
great.
that's
Okay.
just how it's loosely defined.
Got it. I got it. Someone picked up the phone, someone texted somebody, try to do a quick whatever. Okay.
Mhm.
And then the next question would be, when we talk about the collisions as they relate to the use of the cell phone for distracted driving, where have those occurred? Highways, small streets. I can remember an accident when I was in college where a new young driver, and at this time I don't think cell phones were out, or they just came out, or maybe it was the pager. Don't joke me too much, it was a pager. But anyway, regardless, this new driver, somebody who just got their license, distracted, literally on a regular residential road, went over the curb and literally knocked a woman under her house and killed her, right? And so I'm just trying to figure out, is when we talk about placement, and Delegate Ampry was talking about potentially disproportionately putting these in places where we already have equity issues in, I'm just trying to figure out where essentially these would be as they relate to the accidents, as they relate to, you know, where these accidents usually happen.
Gotcha. Sure. So the 58% number that I have isn't deaggregated down to the detail that I think you're looking for, but let me go back and see if I can give you specifics. I think it might be broken down into county, which I don't know how helpful that might be, but I can dig that up and send it over to you. Again, this is enabling legislation. So if people of a jurisdiction don't like this idea, they're not compelled to do it at all. And there's so many requirements about making the placement transparent and requiring public participation in that, and that's all very intentional, because I don't think people should feel as though cameras are being placed in their communities without them having a say. Just anecdotally, in my district, where I would see this, where this working out, is we have two transportation hubs that have buses to and from the metro. There's one in the Germantown Town Center and one just outside of Lake Forest Mall. And that has been, or those have been the areas where we've seen a number of pedestrians being hit and unfortunately killed on their way to the bus stop. And those are predominantly people of color. And so there's that impact too, making sure that we're protecting people who right now during a pandemic are forced to walk or make ends meet and get rid of cars or things to that end. And so that's how I'm seeing it in my district. We have huge state highways that surround those areas. And so those would be areas that I think it would make sense to put a digital spotter. You know, the light system can be a little bit funny. Sometimes people go very quickly on the.
Okay, let's move on here a little bit. Regina, do you have more questions?
I kind of do, Mr. Chairman.
Well, go for it. Go for it. I think she answered. So go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to clarify that I guess what I'm looking for as relates to the questions of the committee is the information potentially aggregated enough? I know you said it's by county, but just to show where it's happening, thereby putting potentially the technology in its place. And I do understand it's an enabling, and someone can decide not to take it. The other point I wanted to ask about was the set percentage. And I know you said the different technologies have different percentages, but it would, I think, make me comfortable if there was something that at least set a baseline. Because we don't want any, you know, again, I think a cell phone is a cell phone, but if I'm grandma and I've got a flip phone, that may not look like the kind of cell phone that most people use now. Would somebody determine that as something else? And so I would love to see something that really kind of sets a standard for the percentage as it relates to the camera. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Delegate Lopez.
Hey, before I recognize Jay Jacobs, Regina, you're talking about pagers. At the beginning of my career, when Ann and I were freshmen, some issue came up about pagers, and a member of my committee asked, who uses pagers anymore? And the lobbyist, I think it was Jay Schwartz, literally said the only people who use pagers are drug dealers and lobbyists. So doesn't that sound like Jay Schwartz? Okay, Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, and kind of, I want to go a little bit further in line with some of the questions that have already been asked. You know, I've been on the committee long enough to be in the beginning of the passing of distracted driving legislation and also an increase in the penalties. So it's interesting, though, the whole concept of this is pretty interesting, but just touching on some of the other images that would be seen in the picture. So, you know, depending on what else is shown in the image, would you be asking the police to ignore evidence of other crimes? I mean, you know, they got a gun in their lap or something. You know, you're just saying it's cell phones only. So if there's evidence of another crime, are you saying we don't want the police to deal with that at all?
So the way the bill is currently written is just to use, you know, cell phone usage as the identifier, and it doesn't enable them to use the photo for a basis of a stop for something else. I think that you get into kind of a slippery slope there, and that in order for this program to work, it has to be finely tuned to solve this problem. And this problem is distracted driving. There's certainly, you know, someone could have a handgun sitting next to them or an open container, but that's, you know, those are other problems that need other solutions. This one, I think, in order to work, has to be finely tuned to solve this problem.
But that's the confusion of the legislation to me, is that even if you saw evidence of something else, you know, you're really asking the police not to go anywhere with it. So that part's a bit confusing. And then another question, we were talking about, under this scenario, there would be potentially more stops. And then I've heard talking about negative interactions with police. So you want less stops so that you'd have less negative interactions with police and not more?
I don't think that that's I think it's a false choice. I think that there should be I think any type of police stop has to be productive. So if that's more or less, if it solves the problem of distracted driving, then that's the direction it needs to go into. But eliminating any possibility for attention that arises from an ambiguous stop, that doesn't work. Increasing law enforcement interactions that have a likelihood of being escalated, that doesn't work either. And so if you're going to be in a situation where you're giving police officers more tools to enforce the law, then there need to be guardrails around making sure that those stops are productive. And that's what we've tried to do, make it a transparent, open process, so that way there's not discrimination that's inherently baked into the program and where these are placed. And when those interactions occur, they can be transparent on the back end, so we know exactly who's being cited, and making sure that the transaction go as smoothly as possible.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but in the beginning of your testimony, you said that you felt like police stops were, for the most part, negative, and that's the reason why I've asked that question. That you know, I wouldn't. Under this scenario, you would have potentially more stops. So, you know, I'm just trying to pile all these things together as I've heard them.
Sure, Delegate. I think it's fair to say that when you get stopped by a police officer, even if it's for a situation where you're given a warning, you know, it's a certain dynamic where you feel like you're being called to the carpet on something, and that's not necessarily a pleasant feeling. I don't think that shows any disrespect for police. I mean, they're pulling you over to help correct a situation that they're seeing. So, I mean, I've done quite a few ride-alongs with my local law enforcement. I know that they do kind of friendly traffic stops as a part of community policing. That's a whole other topic. But in general, and the studies that we've seen show that you're 4 to 5 times more likely to stop a behavior if you have an interaction with a police officer as opposed to passively receiving a ticket like a speeding camera. So that's what my comments were in relationship. Like, I think you do need to be stopped by a police officer for this, and there needs to be that human touch, and that it's not fully automated. But I mean, that's not to disparage the police. That's just what the data shows.
Thank you very much.
Okay, looks Jay, like you were questioning while distracted by a cell phone there. So, and on that note,
And you know the worst part, Mr. Chairman?
what's the worst part, Jay?
It was a potential spam call.
And on that note, thank you very much, Delegate Lopez. That concludes the public hearing on House Bill 1082.
Mr. Chairman, if I may clarify a couple things before you move on.
We're
Okay.
moving on.
All right,
very
thank you,
much.
sir.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to go to House Bill 863, St. Mary's County Delegation. Delegate Clark, I think, is going to be presenting us. And thank you to the judiciary people also.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Delegate Jerry Clark presenting you HB 863, St. Mary's County Motor Vehicle Registration Exception for Golf Carts bill. Hopefully the last one we'll ever have to do. With the successful approval of golf cart use in Golden Beach and St. Mary's County, many rural areas in the county many rural areas have benefited from the citizens in their communities' use of golf carts. St. Mary's County would like to expand this ability, but want to avoid multiple petitions to the legislature and tying up committee time by putting in multiple bills as each community requests the county for permission. Therefore, with this bill, the Board of County Commissioners, St. Mary's County, requests to designate certain county roads golf cart zones. These designations would be: 1, on roads with the maximum speed limit that does not exceed 35 miles an hour, that operate during the hours of dawn to dusk, require golf carts to be equipped with lighting devices as required by the administration, require golf carts to be operated as far to the right of the roadway as feasible, and require golf cart operators to possess a valid driver's license. There is one amendment that we have put on the bill, and that amendment is clarity language that golf carts are permissible on these roads only as designated and authorized by the Board of County Commissioners of St. Mary's County. I would ask that you give a favorable report for this so we don't have to come back every year looking for the ability to do it in another community. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Clark. Any questions for the sponsor? Okay, well, I guess there'll be questions in subcommittee or whatever. Okay, so that ends the public hearing on House Bill 863. Let's proceed then to House Bill 1074. Delegate Watson, I see you somewhere there, Delegate Watson. I did see you.
I am here.
All right, there you are. Welcome to the committee. You've got 4 minutes. The timer will go through 2 minutes 2 times.
I appreciate that. Good to see you, Chairman Barbie. And good afternoon, members of the committee. Delegate Watson, here to present House Bill 1073, Commercial Motor Carriers, Safety, Maintenance, and Insurance Information, also known as James Cochran's Law. Members, I brought this bill last year, and I'm urging the committee to vote favorable on it this year. The purpose of this legislation is pretty simple. It is to require an employer to provide a US DOT number to prospective applicants interested in becoming a driver for their organization. This number provides a safety report of the company as well as insurance information of the trucks covered under that company. The information is crucial to prospective applicants during their hiring process And this bill ensures that prospective drivers have a background of the trucking company they plan to work for before they are hired. Last year's bill was very much like this, but this year we do have the support, I think you'll hear from later, the president of Maryland Motor Truck Association. And the only change was ensuring that the US DOT information is provided to a prospective employee who has received a bona fide offer of employment. Coming after me, you'll be hearing from Miss Jackie Cochran, who you heard from last year. Her son, James Parker Cochran, was driving for a trucking company, which prior to being employed did not have knowledge of the US DOT number before applying to the company and after being employed. If James had access to this tool, it would have certainly influenced his decision for working for this particular company, and the tragic circumstances around Ms. Cochran's son's death might not have occurred. And I'm going to stop here, Mr. Chairman, and let her tell you her story. And in closing, I strongly urge a favorable report for House Bill 1073. Thank you very much.
Okay, Delegate. Yes, we'll welcome Ethel Cochran back to the Environment and Transportation Committee. Mrs. Cochran, welcome back. Mrs. Cochran, are you there? Well, let's go to Louis Campion, and hopefully you'll be able to find her in the interim time. So, Louis, you're on. 2 minutes. You're supporting it this time.
Hey, yes, we are, Mr. Chairman. So thank you again, Louis Campion with Maryland Motor Truck Association, for the record here in support of this legislation. And I think you'll hear from Mrs. Coran about what happened with her son. I know you heard it last year, and what happened with James Coran never should have occurred. There are literally hundreds of thousands of safe, compliant trucking companies that operate quality equipment, that operate safely, and they're in desperate need of truck drivers. In reality, there's an industry shortage of more than 65,000 truck drivers currently. Unfortunately, the company that Mr. Coran was working for was not one of those companies. And so we think this legislation is a great tool, right? It's very specific about the information that a trucking company has to provide to a prospective driver when it makes an offer of employment, so that driver can easily access everything from the inspection history of that company's equipment, the crash history, the safety rating that it has, the number and types of vehicles that it operates, that its operating authority is valid with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. You can pull up its insurance history and much more. And so this really simplifies the access to that information for drivers. We think it makes them, gives them an opportunity to make a really educated decision and ideally avoid working for companies that have subpar safety records, which will drive those companies ideally out of business, and in turn benefits the many legitimate companies who do operate safely, because they're looking for those drivers. And so we think this is also a great recruitment advantage if you do have a good safety record. And for that reason, we are here supporting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is Ethel Coran with us? I mispronounced her name a minute ago. Ms. Coran?
We haven't been able to find her. She was in the meeting, but.
Okay. Are there any, if she pops up before we end, we'll accept her testimony.
Okay.
Because that's an unusual circumstance given her loss. So are there any questions for the sponsor or Mr. Campion? Okay, seeing no questions, then I'm afraid we're going to have to move on. I'm sorry we didn't get to hear Ms. Coran, but okay, that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 1074.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Can I take a quick 15 seconds?
Sure.
Just to remind the committee, Ms. Cochran's son, James, was driving an 18-wheeler that unfortunately flipped on his side, caught on fire, and the young man suffocated to death. The reason he could not extract himself from the vehicle is because there was no internal handle. He had to use a screwdriver to jimmy the door to open it. And once the truck flipped, he did not have access and could not get access to that screwdriver in time. and thus was killed. And so that, in a summary, is what Ms. Cochran was going to share with this committee. If you recall, last year was very heartfelt, very touching, and I hope you all will take that into consideration. This small bill, lives can be changed. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I remember the testimony. Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll go now to House Bill 1098, Delegate Fisher.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Delegate Mark Fisher for House Bill 1098. This bill is titled Elected Officials State-Owned Electric Vehicle Charging Stations Reimbursement. It's a simple bill. It requires any state or local elected official who uses a state-owned electric vehicle charging station to charge a personal electric vehicle to reimburse the state for the electricity used. Seems like a pretty simple principle. I know that when I go to the gas station and I fill up my car, I don't get to drive off without paying. I know when I go into Safeway, which is where I go do food shopping, my wife and I don't get to fill up my cart and drive through the checkout station and say, thank you very much, see you later, without paying. And interestingly enough, this bill, the fiscal note of this bill is really quite fascinating. Let me tell you why. Under state fiscal effect, it says, DGS advises that it is in the process of compiling a comprehensive list of state-owned charging station locations, but that such a list does not currently exist. Isn't that interesting? So a list doesn't exist, so we don't even know how many charging stations we have. And we don't even know who's using them. Allegedly, who's using them are state employees who are driving state-owned electric vehicles. But we don't know. And given the General Assembly's proclivity to constantly subsidize and expand electric car usage, and that is, let's face it, it is the General Assembly's, they may do so if that's the direction they want to go. And that is fine because that's what the majority party wants. The issue still remains that I think you need to pay for your electricity. And I think that given the expansion of electric cars and how many people have them, and the expansion of these electric charging stations that are being paid for and owned by the state, it seems only normal that we would want to make sure that there are meters on those electric charging stations so that when they are used by private individuals, they can indeed pay for their electricity used. Very simple bill, very good government bill. And that is the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, no one else has signed up for or against the bill. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Delegate Boyce? Is your hand up?
Yes, it is. Sorry, my cursor is on the other screen. Then I got to pull the cursor back.
Okay.
The little screen. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Thank you, Delegate Fisher, for bringing this. Can you just explain a little bit about what that cost would look like? So in other words, let me start by saying, how hampered is the state by these electric facilities? So in other words, is it a burden electricity, like, you know, it's just so much electricity that the state can't manage it and therefore we need to pay our share? Or is this something else? I just want to get a better idea about the pay. And I don't have an electric car. I don't care either way, but I'm just curious about are these vehicles draining the electricity bill of the state?
Fair enough. So in the fiscal note, to be fair, it says, hey, it could cost as much as $4,000 per charging station that the state owns to retrofit the charging stations so that there is a meter there. You know, you would swipe your credit card, kind of like what you do when you get gas, and you could indeed charge your car, which would be your own private vehicle. Obviously, if it's a state vehicle, it gets charged for free, and I would presume that they would issue credit cards or some sort of key or some sort of number that would allow you to get the electricity for that particular car. So I think that is that the answer to your question?
Let me ask it a different way.
Sure, of course.
So it says DGS estimates the cost of installing that equipment to be $4,000 per charging station. Got it. So
Yes.
when you just made that analogy, what you're saying is that if you have an electric car, you should be paying a fee to pay back the state the $4,000, not necessarily pay them back for the electricity. I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Of the stations and of the people who use it, how much electricity are we actually using to justify a fee?
Sure. So each car would be charged per kilowatt hour that it's charged, and whatever that electricity fee is what it is. I would imagine that would be established by the current rate of electricity.
Mm-hmm.
The point is that it's creating a market, right? It's creating a market so that everybody gets to pay in accordance with whatever that fee is, as opposed to some getting it for free and others having to pay. So, I mean, think about this logically. It would be the equivalent of certain people going to the gas
station. Yeah, you made that point. I think it's a great point. I'm just trying to figure out. You know, we always say what problem is the bill solving? So
it's solving
saying that we're running up electric bills and therefore need to pay our share. So
sure, it's running up the state's electric bill. But interestingly enough, one thing I didn't know until the fiscal note came out is that we actually don't even know how many of these stations we have. I think we have quite a few of them that the state owns. And so imagine how many people are using these stations and going, "Hey, I just bought myself a brand new electric car, and I work for the state, and I have access to this charging station. I'm just going to get it for free because I can." It seems kind of unfair. And
yeah, I'm just curious about how much the state. I mean, and I am disappointed that the state doesn't know where their stations are, but I'm curious about how much we're actually using in kilowatts. And
Delegate Boyce, that I think that's actually, quite frankly, a brilliant question, because I was shocked when I got the fiscal note that it even said the state doesn't even know. That the state doesn't even know how much electricity is being used by the state, let alone by others. Sure would be nice to know, because I would imagine that it's going to really grow a lot. It's already been growing, and it's going to grow more and more the more electric cars that are available. And I think it is certainly there's an opportunity to get free electricity for many, and I just think it's could be a Pandora's box moving down the road.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Harrison, followed by Delegate Ruth.
Thank you. I used to drive a county-owned vehicle, and when I had needed to fill up, I would go to a county facility to get gas, and we had like a PIN number and, you know, essentially a code in order to utilize that. So are you saying that, well, because I don't know much about electric cars and how they're working. I mean, I've seen the little charging stations, but I've never really looked at them. So an individual, when they go to charge their vehicle, if it's a standard charging station that may be located at a shopping center, does the individual then pay there, what you're suggesting? And then also, could we not just put a stipulation that on the state-owned charging stations that individuals who drive state-owned vehicles have to use a PIN in a similar manner?
Sure. The answer is yes and yes. So to the extent that a private charging station is being put into place, let's say at a shopping center, which I support, by the way, wholeheartedly, because it's privately driven. Clearly, they're doing it. There's a profit motive, and they want you to pay for that electricity. And I would imagine there's a card swipe, maybe even a PIN, and you thus charge your car, and you get charged accordingly, whatever the kilowatt hour is at that time, or whatever they decide to charge at that time. Similarly, with state vehicles, it just seems that should follow. But imagine if you're a state employee and you drive personally your electric car to your job, and then you take the state's electric car to do your actual state job. You come back and you're like, I'm going to charge my car while I'm there. And it, you know, I think that that opportunity is there. It seems grossly unfair. I'm all for the state. You know, if you want to have a state electric fleet, that makes sense. Go for it. If you want to have state charging stations, go for it. It's just that I don't think that private cars should be able to use those stations without paying. By all means, use them, but pay. Yeah.
So just to go back with that, so I take, you know, my state electric vehicle, but there, and I'm using whatever PIN that I have. I'm assuming that it works that way. I don't know. But, you know, there should be some mechanism to say that this PIN number is perhaps using too much electricity, and then therefore, you know, that individual who's assigned that PIN could then be, you know, punished or at least questioned. And so I just don't, I'll listen.
I agree with you, Delegate Harrison. I mean, it's really the central point of the bill, because as I said, I was shocked when DGS, Department of Government Services, said that they don't even know how many we have. And which means there's really not a policy now, which means that there's really no measuring of how much any individual is technically using or not really matching the car with the state car. So apparently it's kind of like the wild, wild west in Maryland when it comes to state charging stations. You know, just drive up, plug it in, and it's yours.
Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Fisher, you know, it's funny, I'm old enough to remember before we had cell phones, and now, you know, I'm never without this in my hand. It's with me everywhere. I use it for both work and personal. It's my personal cell phone, but I use it for both. And so, you know, often it won't make it through the day. And I know many other people are in the same position. Do you think that elected officials and state employees should have to reimburse the state if we charge our cell phones in our office?
I think that's a brilliant hit job question, which is not relevant to this bill, because charging a car, and the amount of money it costs, Delegate, to charge a car, which is quite a bit of money, especially with the policies that we're putting out of this General Assembly, which constantly increase prices of electricity for the average consumer. Not only are they not in any way similar, but it's a hit job question, and it just lacks credibility altogether.
I'm sorry, I disagree. It's not a hit job question. It's a matter of degree. I agree. That's a good point. But where do you draw that line? You know, between
if you're fair enough, if you are in your own way testifying that you think it's okay to use state electricity for your private car, I don't think that'll stomach very well with the voters. Just saying.
I'm not saying anything one way or another. I'm just asking the question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's try not to characterize the motives of people who ask questions here. Delegate Healy, then Delegate Anderton, in that order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Delegate, I'll frame this a little bit differently. If you're a state employee, you don't pay for your parking a lot of times. There's a parking lot or a garage that you can use, and you don't have to reimburse the state for the use of that. Couldn't this be considered another kind of benefit to the employee that just goes with the kind of reimbursement they get?
Yeah, so the bill actually doesn't, the bill as it's currently written, Delegate Healy, is elected officials, any state or local elected officials. In other words, it's elected officials.
So you're not talking about state employees. I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about state employees.
No. And that's fair, right? Because fair enough, because that's a discussion that probably should be in another bill, and it would be a fair thing to talk about. And I hear what you're saying. There are things as perks, and I agree with you. But it's not a good look when we're passing bills that provide incentive after incentive for electric vehicles, and then at the same time say, oh, gee, I can't wait to get the free electricity. That's all I'm saying. That's all this bill is doing. And sure enough, as I said, with the fiscal note, as it turns out, there's a problem. There's a problem because we don't even know how many of these are, how many we have, and we don't even know who's using them. And
Right.
so,
Okay, let me just finish with, I don't have an electric vehicle, so I don't know exactly how these work, but I do see the charging stations in grocery store parking lots. They are free and they're set aside for people to use. So you can't park there and run into the store. You've got to leave that for the people who have electric vehicles. And it's offered free as a benefit to people who shop there. Like they also can park for free there. I also have seen local governments have set up charging stations free for the citizens. So when they visit City Hall, they can use one of these at the taxpayer's expense. And so the question really, I think that we're all trying to look at is how expensive is this if lots of people are giving it away anyway?
sure. Certainly we can ask people who have electric cars, but let's just say this. I think the cumulative effect of so many electric cars going to state electric charging stations, the cost, I bet it's pretty substantial. I do
But
hear you.
you're only talking about elected officials and there aren't that many of them who have
Yeah, I think it's probably more than you might think, but let's just talk about your other point, which is stations at, let's say, grocery stores. If assuming that what you're saying is correct, and I don't know if it is because I've never seen one at a grocery store, certainly not in Calvert, where I represent, that would be the purview of the private company, if that's really the private company that owns the grocery store, if that's really what they want to do. I would proffer that won't be long lasting because of the cost over time. But I've never seen one. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but I certainly would love to see one of those and drive up to the grocery store.
They're in my district, so you come to Real Park and you can see them.
I will. I promise you, because I've never seen them. I mean, we don't have them in Calvert for obvious reasons. And, we drive a little bit more, but
Thank you.
Delegate Anderton, then Delegate Lehman.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Fisher, Honey Badger, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, Delegate Anderson. How are you?
Good, good. This is a new concept to me, so I'm just curious. When you have an electric vehicle and you go to a charging station, aren't they retrofitting? And anybody else whoever can answer this, please do so. Are they retrofitting traditional gas stations into charging stations now?
So I haven't seen that. I've only seen kind of standalone EV charging stations. I haven't seen them integrated with actually a gasoline station, at least not yet. I'm not saying that doesn't exist in Maryland, may very well.
I don't think the oil companies would want to encourage that.
No, I mean, so if you go to there's 3 charging booths at our mall in Salisbury. I've never been to them because I don't have an electric vehicle, but I was curious, do you pay to use them or are they all free everywhere?
Yeah, so I don't know about the private charging stations, but what we do know is the state charging stations are free. And we don't know how many there are because DTS is in the process of counting them. And we don't know how many people are using them for their private vehicles because.
Yeah, I was trying to look at the equity portion, for us with non-electric vehicles, we have to buy gas and come to Annapolis and go everywhere. And so I was wondering if, in my mind, if you go to, the mall or somewhere private, if the electricity is free, or if you have to swipe a card to pay by the kilowatt you charge or something.
I think that's the model. Certainly that's probably the proper model. I mean, I think if it were privately driven, if EV stations were truly privately driven, they would probably charge per kilowatt hour. Right now in Maryland and federally, there are so many incentives to install these things by states and by private companies that they're being subsidized pretty heavily. But let's face it, somebody's paying for the electricity.
No, I understand that, and I appreciate that. But I was just curious, can anybody answer that's on this screen here.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
I can just say that I've never seen a commercial charging facility at a shopping center or at a grocery store that charged anybody money for it. The only times where you see charging, asking for money is if you go to a Tesla supercharger, they link your credit card to it and they get money from you that way. Or if there aren't very many of them, but there are charging centers around all throughout the country where you do, have an app and it would be linked to your credit card. But if it's like the place in front of the Giant in Rockville or a shopping center in Prince George's County, that's almost always free.
But it is moving to a pay model, I guess.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
So, I mean, because I understand where you're coming from with the legislative idea and the intent. I get it. But I was just curious to see if it's free everywhere and if, all the charging stations are open to the public, then that's fine. But if it's like not segregated off and you have to, only certain people can use it, then you have some valid points. But I don't know enough about it. I'm going to research it a little more, kind of.
Cornbread in
Yes,
your district, you've got Ocean City, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, just outside.
So,
Yeah.
You know where the Clarion Fontainebleau
Yes.
hotel is? Right across the street is a public lot with a free electric charging station. You have to pay for the parking, but you would have had to pay for the parking anyway.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, may I answer?
I appreciate this. This gives me something to learn about as we all transition more towards.
Exactly
Yeah.
right.
So we've got Delegate Lehman, Wyville, and Stewart in that order. So if you're done, Delegate Anderson, or are you done? Okay, so Delegate Lehman is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Fisher.
Mary, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate Fisher. I wonder if you considered, once you learned that the Department of, I don't know if you said General Services or Transportation Services, once you learned that there was no inventory of electric vehicle charging stations, did you consider, instead of this bill, doing a bill to direct whatever the relevant agency is to do that inventory and first of all, know where all these stations are, and B, come up with a system like what Delegate Harrison described. We served together in the county council, and as she said, if you drove a county car, you had to have a PIN number to put, to fill up at a gas pump, and they were, restricted to county pumps, which were, all around the county, and our Department of General Services could tell you where they were. They were at firehouses and police stations and so on. Did you consider taking that approach instead? And the second part of my question is, what makes you believe this is a problem? Because if, nobody knows where these stations are and who's using them, how do you even know this is a problem?
Oh, sure. So the first question is answered in the fiscal note. It says DGS is already doing the study because they don't know. So the study is ongoing as to how many there are. And the second part of your question is, what makes you think this is a problem? It's just a simple good government bill. Kind of makes sense. It's interesting, Delegate. I've been in the cell tower business, and I started when 3% of the population had cell phones. And then when I got elected, I was told, don't vote on any legislation that deals with your industry, even if it doesn't affect you. And that's exactly what I do. In fact, today there was a bill on the floor that dealt just kind of tangentially with my industry, and I still recused myself because it was the right thing to do. The right thing to do here is we have lots of individuals in this General Assembly who are rapidly pushing a prescribed technology. They're prescribing technology rather than letting the marketplace determine what technology should work. They are subsidizing it, and they're voting to subsidize it. And then there's always the danger that that individuals could benefit from it. And I think this is a way of preventing that from happening so that we keep ourselves from getting into trouble.
Well, so I would just, a follow-up question, again, to the point of, why you think why you're assuming it's a problem. Why would you limit the bill to just elected officials? When I'm going to take Prince George's as an example, I think there were far more non-elected officials, government employees in various agencies, dozens of them that had, now these were government cars, so electric vehicles owned by the county, but they were take-home cars. I just don't understand why you would be focusing on elected officials when in any given jurisdiction, there's just a handful of them. And going back to the point about the inventory, it's good to hear DGS is doing an inventory, but why not approach it a different way with a PIN or other security system, a PIN number, something that stops people from, charging their private vehicles at government charging stations. And that's
Delegate Lehman, I would welcome the amendment that would expand it to everybody. I think that'd be great. And the PIN idea, I think, is terrific. I mean, kudos to you for doing that in Prince George's County. I mean that, because we're apparently not doing it at the state level. And I would imagine the state probably has even more charging stations than Prince George's.
Are you good, Delegate Lehman? Okay. So next will be Delegate Weigel, then Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Delegate Fisher, for bringing this bill forward. I heard a lot of comparisons being made to private industry, private business as compared to state government. Do you see a difference between what a private business may wish to do to entice folks to shop at their location versus asking the taxpayers to pay for electric? Because we all know electricity is not free.
Sure. There is a huge difference, because in the private sector, if they are making a business decision to put in a charging station, that's great. If they're making a business decision to put a charging station in that is free, that's up to them as well. But there's this thing that's called go woke or go broke. That's what I like to call it. And apparently we like in Annapolis to go woke, and then before you know it, the state's going broke because we've decided that certain things should be free, and people in Calvert County should have to pay gas taxes, and people in Calvert County should have to pay for their gasoline, but others don't have to. And I think that that's just a real bad look. I think it's obvious, right? I mean, why would we even debate this? It's obvious. It's just fascinating to me that there's even a debate. And it won't go well for those who think it's a bad idea. I think, because it's not fair to my people in Calvert, it's not fair to your people. So, let's just level the playing field. And if electric cars are really that great and they're really that much cheaper to operate, pay for your own electricity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Stewart.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to ENT. Delegate Fisher, it's great to see you. Thanks for bringing this bill. I'm still thinking about it. I think it's an interesting concept. Certainly, we have ethics in our purview here in ENT, and so we're constantly thinking about, public officials using private resources for public gain. And I think from that perspective, it's an interesting bill. But going along what the lines of, I think, what Delegate Healy and Delegate Lehman both kind of touched on, would you be open to an amendment expanding the bill to also include free parking for elected officials? Because what I'm thinking is, it's a massive subsidy. Obviously, it's a lot of money to maintain parking lots. A lot of, Annapolis is not super transit accessible, but a lot of our municipalities, for our local officials, probably are parking in state lots. And when, we could be basically making them eat that cost, the cost of their behavior, and try to, induce them to take a more, eco-friendly transit option. I'm not as familiar with the EV stuff. I drive a Ford Fusion. Sometimes my wife allows me to drive her Kia. So I haven't jumped on the EV train yet, but I do like to take transit. And so I was wondering if you'd be open, if this bill moves through subcommittee, if you'd be open to me attaching that as a friendly amendment.
So Delegate Stewart, I can't wait to have you on my podcast. I mean that sincerely. I want the committee to know he has agreed to come on. And, but I would welcome that amendment, of course. Of
Okay.
course.
Well, thanks. And I also look forward to the podcast appearance.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the public hearing on House Bill 1098. We'll now
Thank you.
Bill 1114, Delegate Ahrens. Delegate Ahrens? Is he in the room, Trish?
He was. I think he left. We'll try to look for him if you want to skip over
Yeah,
to.
I'll tell you what, why don't we go to Delegate Parrott, because I know
Yeah.
he's here. I hope.
Oh, boy.
Neil? Apparently not. Okay, how about Delegate Lasanti? How about if I pronounce it Lasanti? No?
All right, we'll do some hunting. Hold on.
Okay. Okay, sit tight, people. Well, we're looking for sponsors.
Hey, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I got a question. When's the podcast with Vaughn and Mark?
I'm sure, I don't know, but I'm sure he'll have a video, an audio clip.
I'll send you all the link when it's live. It's Delegate Fisher. I think has had a podcast for quite a while. He generally has guests of a different political persuasion than mine, but he's open up. I think to his credit, he's trying to get diverse voices and viewpoints in there. So I'll certainly let you know, Delegate Gilchrist, when it goes live.
Yeah, I want a front row seat on my couch with popcorn. Please.
Yeah, it's too bad.
I'm glad he's expanding beyond people who accused Hillary Clinton of having a pedophile ring. So
I said we have an ENT watch party. Let's go.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a shame that the pandemic is still raging because it would be a great opportunity to have a live show.
I'm sorry.
They're looking
Mr. Chairman.
We have got
Delegate Ahrens.
Okay. Delegate Ahrens. Okay, House Bill 1114.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. No, that's good. You're on.
Okay.
You get 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Okay. HB 114, illegal dumping. For the record, Delegate Steve Ahrens. It's great to be in front of the Environment and Transportation Committee. HB 114 is a bill I brought last year, and the bill simply expands the illegal dumping and litter control law by prohibiting a person from disposing of yard waste on a highway. The bill also provides penalties, but fines are not mandated. This is a bill that I kind of hooked up with ABATE. I'm a motorcycle rider. I've seen this bill. I've seen the results of some of the actions when people leave their grass clippings as they're mowing their lawn. They'll just blow it into the road. And the dangers that come along with that, it's a little frightening when you see somebody skidding out of control because they don't actually see it. It's almost like ice, if you will. The other areas in some neighborhoods, and I think we all just passed a bill last year. We went with the balloon bill as far as trying to keep the environment pretty and clean. It's a good bill. It's a sound bill. I think the bill is going to help some people understand that there are some dangers other than just snow and ice. So on that, I would ask for a favorable report on the bill, and I think I have a couple witnesses.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
and let's go to them first before we entertain questions. It looks like you have Ken Eaton, Zach Kelleher, Dan Lundry, Ivan Lanier are the ones who want to testify. So let's start with Ken Eaton.
Good afternoon. My name is Ken Eaton. I'm with the Board of Directors with ABATE of Maryland, the largest motorcycle rights organization in Maryland. I'm here to request your support for HB 1114, the yard waste bill. We support 1114 as it pertains to the safety of all highway users. This bill will clarify and hopefully include grass clippings and leaves that are blown or deposited onto the roadway from adjacent properties. The existing law seems to more directly address items that have fallen off of a vehicle, like from a truck, but yard waste coming directly from properties along roadways seems to be a gray area in the current laws. We feel allowing this condition sets the stage for roadway safety hazards and environmental hazards. The roadway safety hazards are created by yard debris in the form of grass clippings and leaves. This accumulation is mostly 70% moisture content in a lot of cases. That can become very slippery, and the operator of a motorcycle, automobile, or even a bicycle can lose control and causes accidents or injuries. In addition, items that are blown from lawnmowers onto the road contain trash and broken glass, shredded cans, you name it. The environmental hazards can probably be better addressed by one of the other witnesses today, but the grass and debris accumulates in our ditches, storm drain inlets, curbs and gutters, and other drainage ways, causes clogging, poor drainage conditions. And it's kind of counterproductive to the efforts of many municipalities and counties that are trying to address their NPDES MS4 permitting. It leaves excess nutrients in the debris that runs off into the waterways and end up in the bay. So in a nutshell, roadway hazards and environmental hazards are why we'd like to urge your support of HB 1114.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, Zach Kelleher. Zach?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Zach Kelleher, your Sassafras Riverkeeper with Shore Rivers. I just want to thank you for this opportunity to submit testimony in support of this House Bill 1114 on behalf of Shore Rivers and our 3,500 members across the Eastern Shore. Every year, millions of Marylanders spend countless hours raking leaves, trimming shrubs and trees, cutting grass, all that good stuff that I'm sure most of us in this room here do every year, especially in the fall. But all of this yard waste, if you leave it on the property and it's properly disposed of, when your local jurisdictions have their pickup dates, their street cleanings, that kind of thing, generally, if that's all followed, it's relatively harmless. But unfortunately, we have a lot of people that don't follow the local ordinances and are just dumping the yard waste straight into the roadways, other public areas, and we even have a few people that dump it in the waterways on a regular basis. So besides that being a lot of unnecessary work and labor, this leaf litter and grass clippings also pose a serious environmental threat to our waterways and pose the safety risk to our community members, as you just heard from my colleague Ken. So when improperly disposed of, this leaf litter adds significant amounts of nutrients to our waterways and also destroys critical habitat for thousands of our native species of pollinators, insects, and mammals. We all hear about all the pollutants, especially nitrogen and phosphorus, that are really impacting negatively the health of the bay right now in our local waterways. A study conducted by the United States Geological Survey in 2016 found that 56% of the phosphorus in urban stormwater each year is coming from this leaf litter, grass clippings, and yard waste being improperly disposed of on our roadways and in our waterways. So the simple fix is that we need to be addressing this and keeping it on our property, and also following all local regulations. This bill is a very simple fix that just adds leaf litter and yard waste to existing litter laws and the penalties there. You know, it's a good bill if you have conservationists and bikers on the same page fighting for the same thing. And so I urge the committee for a favorable report. Thank you.
Well, actually, some of the worst bills are the ones where the far right and the far left agree. So it's not always a given, but thank you anyway. Dan Landry, then Ivan Lanier.
Mr. Chairman, if I may go first, because Dan Landry is the SME for PHI that I've
Sure.
brought with me.
Go ahead, Ivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just one point of information before just asking the sponsor, Delegate Arntz, did you speak to your possible amendment to the bill?
No, I did, but I did not. But please do. We do have an amendment with the committee right now. We sent it down.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Ivan.
Okay, great. With that, with the amendment that the sponsor had just mentioned, which would kind of make sure, because it wasn't focused on the electric comedies, we would just have no need for our testimony as long as that amendment was offered by the sponsor, and we can save the committee some time.
Okay. In that case, I'll move on to Dan Landry. Mr. Landry.
So this is Dan Landry, manager of vegetation management with PHI, which is the holding company for Pepco and Delmarva Power. My testimony was going to be in support of Ivan Lanier. Ivan, do you want me to continue? I'm not sure based on the last.
Actually, I'm still on, and there's, again, Mr. Chairman, as long as the amendment has been offered, we stand down.
Does this amendment just exclude power companies? Is that what the amendment does?
Yes, it
Sorry.
did. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Mr. Chair, I apologize for that. The amendment was one of the confusion factors we ran into was power companies are actually doing their work, and they wanted to ensure that they were not included in this bill because they are not a permanent problem. They're in there doing their work and trying to fix it. And that is not the intent of the bill, to go after power companies. The intent of the bill is really to keep the grass clippings and the other garbage off the sides of the road.
Okay. Any questions for the sponsor or any of the witnesses? I see, let me just see what.
Yes.
Delegate Stewart and then Delegate Healy.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I never put my hand down after Delegate Fisher's bill.
Oh, okay, Delegate Healy.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is, I remember a similar bill last year, and I'm going to ask the same question I asked then. In some towns, like the one where I live, when they collect leaves in the fall, people rake the leaves to the curb and then they're loose. They just pile them up, and then once a week they come by with a truck that's kind of got this massive vacuum on it and suck all the leaves up and take them away. And so they don't have to be bound or put in bags or anything. And it's a courtesy to the community. But sometimes weather happens and those get blown into the street because it's, piled up on the curb. And so how would this bill affect that?
I don't know exactly what the legal term would be, but if your community is already doing it and we're looking at a problem that's not really a problem, it's something you do on an annual basis, I doubt that you'd be reported. And I think that leaves will blow in regardless of where you pile them. They're going to be on the roads. But I think this bill is intended that if you're deliberately throwing your leaves into the street to get them out of your yard with hopes that the traffic will dissipate them, I think that's where this bill actually comes into play.
So you're going to rely on people not reporting their neighbors?
Well, if your neighbor's going to report you for something that you're providing as a service, I would think that would be a problem. But if you're deliberately, the intent here is that people deliberately cut their grass, they deliberately throw their product into the street to get rid of it. They don't want it on their land, and that's what we're trying to address with this bill.
So is there maybe an exception for if you're following local rules of some kind?
If it would get this bill passed, I think local rules should be an important thing. You do have local jurisdictions and local governing bodies. I would support that personally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Harrison, then Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Delegate Ahrens. I remember the bill last year, and I think that, but I just don't remember all of the testimony, and I may have asked this last year, and I just don't remember what the answer may have been if I did ask it. So first, is this only for state roads, state numbered roads, or is this for all?
This is for all. It's not stipulated in the bill.
Okay. And then secondly, so the state itself cuts the medians in the middle of highways, and my experience has been that the grass always blows onto the streets. It's never collected. And this may have been the question that I asked last year. I know I certainly thought about it. How does that work?
Well, I think the deliberate intent to put it on the street is what the bill's addressing, not the inadvertent nature, if you will. I don't think that's part of a problem. I cut my grass and I don't blow it into the street, but I can imagine with a bad storm, some might get blown onto the road.
Yeah, when the state cuts the medians, there's never a collection. It's always, just left there, dispersed from the mower. And in some areas, I can think of specifically, it's a smaller road, but it's got a pretty wide median in my district or close to my district. And the grass can sometimes, they only come through like once a month probably. And then during the high growing season, the grass gets really tall. So by the time they cut it, there's so much grass in the street and whatever other debris may have been in the grass when they cut it, it just looks absolutely horrible. And I can imagine that, you know, someone riding a bike, you know, a motorcycle could, you know, be injured from that. And at that point, then the state is at fault. And so, you know, I'm just wondering, how do we rectify that? I understand the problem, but the state sometimes is a problem too.
Well, I think that's a very important thing you brought up. If the state's a problem with that, I mean, this isn't necessary. This is not part of this bill, I don't believe, because the state is actually doing the work of the people. And if they're throwing stuff into the road, it's just like any other debris. If somebody's throwing a tire onto the road, if somebody's throwing that, I mean, the state should be more aware of that. And in those instances, I would call State Highway or who's ever in charge of maintenance of that and address that with them. But I don't think that's the intent of the bill. The intent of the bill is purely trying to keep people from doing what's not even necessary. If you ever ride through a decent neighborhood and you see somebody cuts it out there, it looks tough. It looks rough. When all it takes is a couple minutes just to make sure you're cutting your grass into your yard, not out of your yard. And actually, it's better for the yard if you keep your clippings in it. So I'm not trying to address the state's issues or potential issues, but I would think they would want to address that themselves if you made them aware of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Are there any more questions for the sponsor or his witnesses? Okay, and there appear, let's see, is anybody? Wow, the Maryland Judiciary has signed up with written testimony against the bill. Delegate Ahrens, have you read this?
No, I have not. I'm not privy to that information.
I wonder if we're making them do work, because that's usually testify against things.
With all due respect, Chairman, if you would make them do the work, I'd prefer that, you know.
Right. I don't think it's possible for anybody to make them do things they don't want to do. Okay. That concludes the public hearing on House Bill 1114. Thank you, Delegate Ahrens. You now have another bill, House Bill
Yes, I do.
17.
Okay. For the record, Delegate Steve Ahrens, representing District 36. H Bill 1117 is the Kent Narrows Bridge State Highway right-of-way fishing prohibition. This bill, and I need to make this clear because we've amended this bill a couple times to match it. The amendment should be at your desk. This bill is specific to trying to prevent people fishing from areas that are currently posted as non-fishing. Down in the Kent Narrows, we have kind of a unique situation under the old Narrows Bridge where people are going down there. It's dangerous. They're climbing fences. They're doing some some damage down in that area. Plus, it's a very dangerous situation. I don't know if anybody in the committee's ever been through the Kent Narrows, but should somebody fall into there, there's a high rate of current in that area. And it's just a very dirty and just a tough area for us to actually maintain. And the bill is trying to prevent people from going down there and subjecting them to a fine, a maximum fine of up to $500. It's a good bill. It's addressing a need. It's addressing a dangerous situation in many cases. And I look for a favorable recommendation on the bill.
Okay, we also have Todd Moan with the Queen Anne's County, well, it just says Queen Anne's County. So Mr. Moan, are you with us? Todd?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Mon, Queen Anne's County Administrator. And I'm here today to testify in favor of House Bill 1117 as amended by the delegate. Very simply, it provides for a clear restriction for fishing activities that are in a very well-defined area under and from the Kent Narrows Drawbridge on State Route Maryland 18. It gives also the enforcement authority to restrict that activity to our local sheriff. And this, as Delegate Ahrens mentioned, these are areas that are signed with no fishing, and there's been fencing put up, but it just goes unignored and has never been enforced. So to elaborate, you know, for many years we have experienced safety problems down there from individuals fishing under the drawbridge. Specifically, they go down underneath the bridge. There's a concrete apron that is partially the foundation for the bridge that they get up underneath there. It's very wet a lot of times, very slippery, and they stand there and fish and cast their lines directly out into the channel. and they interfere with boats. So it's a very dangerous and unsafe activity for both the fishermen and the boating public that are traveling or queuing up underneath there to go through the Narrows drawbridge when it opens up, on the hour during the summertime. Additionally, we see folks down there dropping their lines off of the bridge itself from the top down into the channel, which also creates that same unsafe condition, which we want to restrict and have some enforcement activity. So as mentioned, there have been signs down there from time to time that post that restriction. They get destroyed, thrown overboard, what have you. The fencing has been knocked down and it's not well maintained by the state highway. So we've prepared this House Bill 1117 narrowly to address this compelling problem that provide for local enforcement. So on behalf of Queen Anne's County, we would ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1117 as it's been amended.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a number of questions, and let me see who's first. Okay, the order would be Delegate Jacobs, then Delegate Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Todd, maybe this question's better for you. This area would only be the area that's prohibited now. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct, Delegate Jacobs. The area is essentially the concrete apron underneath the bridge and adjacent to the bridge. We have a small marina there, and folks kind of get up underneath there, and it's a very precarious situation that's been posted from time to time.
So you're not prohibiting areas where fishing is not prohibited.
That's correct. I mean, we don't want to stop the fishing down there. There are other areas in the Kent Narrows, namely under the new bridge, the Route 50 overpass. We have some areas on that side underneath that bridge. There's a boardwalk underneath there. So we don't want to restrict fishing in areas where it is safe and currently permitted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Healy, then Jim Gilchrist, then Gilchrist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Mullen, your issue seems to be with enforcement. You say you've posted it, but what is stopping you from enforcing it where you've posted that they're not supposed to do it?
Very good question. Thank you. Well, the area is the state highway right of way. So we're county government, so we don't really have the authority to post signs. The state has posted signs down there. We don't have that authority, but this bill would give us the authority to enforce that with our local sheriff department. And we'll certainly work with our friends at State Highway on this going forward, but we don't typically have the authority to do that in the state highway right of way. The original version of the bill basically said state highway rights of ways, and that expanded the area to a point where it wasn't the intent. We wanted to make this specifically in this one very defined area.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, who's next? Delegate Gilchrist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Healy asked my question.
Oh, okay. Any other questions for the sponsor or the proponent for the bill? Okay, seeing none, we do have one person signed up in opposition. His name is David Sikorsky, and he's with CCA Maryland. And forgive me, I don't remember what CCA Maryland stands for, so maybe Mr. Sikorsky can tell me.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is David Sikorsky with the Coastal Conservation Association.
I see.
And we are Maryland's lone statewide recreational angling-based organization, part of the larger national recreational fishing organization that's been in place since 1977. We were happy to celebrate our 25th year through the confusing times of 2020 last year. So I'm glad to be here today, and I'm pleased to hear that these amendments have been made because the amendments have addressed our concerns. So I will cut it short and say that we have removed our opposition of this bill as amended. Really appreciate that, and I'd really like to look forward, or like to work with folks in Queen Anne County and Maryland DNR to work on some better outreach with signage at the allowed fishing area. I think quite often there are users there that are possibly Spanish speakers. And I know that the department is not doing ample outreach to Spanish speakers in many fishing areas. And that's something I've been working on in my role as a Sport Fish Advisory Commissioner. And it's a priority of CCA. So I'd really like to work on that with the county and with the department. And hopefully that can solve some of the existing problems which can occur at public access areas. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for the newly in favor David Sikorsky? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 1117.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, let's go to House Bill 1147, Delegate Parrott.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee. It's great to be with you here, and I'm going to go ahead and try and share my screen for a quick PowerPoint. Let's see. All right.
Okay, and I'm starting up my little cell phone here, so I'll start it once you get into your testimony.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is House Bill 1147. It's the Traffic Signal Modernization Act of 2021. What this bill with the proposed amendments will do are as follows. And before I get into what it says, I just want to let you know there was a little snafu in the bill drafting, and so we are working on amendments to make sure that it does what this slide says it will do. But basically, House Bill 1147 will set up a traffic control signal modernization fund to update Maryland traffic signals. The fund will be financed by 6% of the ticket cost for red light running camera fines. That 6% would go into this fund, and it's not an additional fee, it's just 6% of what's being collected currently. The modernization will require in Maryland that all traffic signals be upgraded to operate with LED traffic signal heads, and they also will be provided with battery backup systems. The goal is to have all the signals in the state upgraded by 2028, with the city of Baltimore signals being upgraded at the end of 2032. The reason for the difference is that there are a lot of signals in the city of Baltimore that don't have LEDs yet. That would need to be upgraded, and of course to get the batteries in. That we're talking a lot of signals in the city, so to give them an extra 4 years makes sense. And the last item would be that when the traffic signals are fully upgraded, the fund will be used to help. Well, when it's fully upgraded, we're going to use the fund to maintain those battery systems. This is just one example of a traffic signal. This happens to be in Frederick County. And you can see on the far left side of the screen, they've got that little box, a gray box, and that's where the controller is, and that's where the battery backup would actually go. And I believe this signal already has LED heads in the signals. Just for backgrounds, in 2006, there were two teenagers, Scott Kaplan and Teresa Howard, who were killed in a crash at the intersection of 175 and the I-95 southbound ramp in Howard County. Going to the last bullet, as a result of that crash, Howard County mandated that all county-operated traffic signals be equipped with battery backup so that the signals would continue to operate even if the electricity goes off. That happened right in that same year, 2006. It was a very aggressive program. And now every signal in Howard County, whether it's a state highway or a Howard County controlled signal, has the LEDs and has battery backup. And of course, this crash that occurred in 2006 could have easily been prevented had battery backup been installed at the signal at that time. Thankfully, now it is. Quick facts, LED lighting has been implemented at 95% of the State Highway Administration controlled intersections. Currently, only 30% of the intersections in Maryland have battery backup. And that 30% includes all of the Howard County signals and Anne Arundel County. All Anne Arundel County controlled signals also operate with battery backup systems. This is a trend that's going all across the country. New York City has a whole bunch of them. Glendale, California, every single signal there has battery backup. I already mentioned Howard and Anne Arundel. Scottsdale, Arizona, they're all battery backup. You can see as the list goes on. And these are just a few. You can go all across the country and find out that this battery backup system is being installed. As long ago as 2001, that's when California instituted a statewide program for the high risk locations. 20 years later, you look at the Maryland State Highway Administration, and we are still trying to install battery backup at the high risk locations. And I believe it's time for Maryland to be serious about this and try and increase safety to provide battery backup at all signals in the state. You all know this, we're on ENT, but LED signals, they're good technology, 85% savings over incandescent bulbs. They're brighter, they emit light more evenly, they're much better in foggy conditions, and they don't have to be changed as much. So in the long run, having LEDs are much more efficient than incandescents. Battery backups, of course, are a safety device. When the power goes out, the lights will stay on, and appropriate traffic controls continued to be provided, and it doesn't require law enforcement to come off of other duties to control those signals.
If you could wrap up, that'd be great.
I will. With an effort towards Vision Zero, this is a key tool that we need to do to increase safety. And I guess I was off by about 10 seconds, Mr. Chairman, but that
22, but who's counting?
All right, very good. So that's it for the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, before I recognize the other people who are signed up in favor of the bill, let me just say that one of the great things about being in the legislature is you get to see all sorts of unusual things occur. For example, today, Delegate Neil Parrott is asking us to follow the leadership of liberal California.
That's true.
Okay, so the following people are signed up in favor of the bill, and no one is signed up against the bill. And they are Alan Matheny, Linda Howard, William Howard, and William Howard, those three individuals. Everybody else is written. So Alan Matheny, Washington County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to the committee. You've got 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. I'm in favor of the bill, and the way we sort of got involved with this is I was out directing traffic at an intersection. I come from an electrical background. I hold 3 master electrician license in 3 different states. And as I'm standing there directing traffic, I'm wondering, why don't we have a battery backup or a generator? So I asked, we didn't have anything like that. They gave me the ability to get the things I needed to hook up a gas generator. We used that system in some of our busier intersections for probably 1.5 years until the county engineers decided, hey, let's do a battery backup. We have battery backup on some of our bigger intersections. We haven't been able to do all of them, but the busy ones, it keeps us from standing out in the middle of a 6-lane intersection trying to direct traffic. So it's made it safer for the police agencies, the fire departments, and of course the citizens, because as we know, the law says if the traffic lights are out, the intersection should become a 4-way stop if nobody's there directing traffic. Well, that probably doesn't happen most of the time. So once the lights are back up and running, it just saves a lot of aggravation for everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, Linda Howard and William Howard. Let's start with Linda. Linda? How about William Howard? Okay, we're striking out on the Howards here.
No, Mr. Chairman, we were both on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. Linda or Bill, whoever wants to go first.
You on mute? Okay.
Do you have me now?
I can hear somebody, but I can't see you. But that's okay. I can hear you. That's the important thing.
My name is Linda Howard.
Oh, and now we can see you too. Oh, do you have YouTube on? You need to shut it off. Yeah, she's got the hearing on background on YouTube.
Mr. Chair, this is.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I think it's because they're in the same room with 2 different computers.
Are you in the same room with 2 different computers?
Yes.
Yes. Move to one.
Turn one of them off. Okay. So Bill, why don't you start, and then Linda can go after you on that computer. How's that? You need to unmute yourself. There we go.
How about that?
That's perfect. And you've got 2 minutes. Welcome to the committee.
Well, it's nice to be here, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being technologically challenged.
Oh, you should always have a 14-year-old in your house for such situations.
I am Bill Howard. I'm proud to be Tara's father. Late in the evening of January 6, 2006, we received a telephone call whose message all parents hope they never hear. Linda spoke to the mother of one of Tara's friends. There had been an accident involving our daughters. I made the 10-minute drive from my house to the accident scene where I saw and identified the body of my beloved daughter. Tara was seated in the passenger seat of the car. In the back seat was a young man whom I had never seen. I'm here today to express my support for Delegate Parrott's bill, House Bill 1147, which calls for the battery backup systems for all traffic lights in Maryland. I will not mention any of the horrific events which this accident set in motion, only that these were caused by a malfunctioning traffic light. I will emphasize instead just a few of the things Tara's family and innumerable friends have done to improve the lives of many citizens of the state, as she did, and do them in her memory. For 5 years on the anniversary of the accident, we prepared and served dinners for the homeless in Baltimore, whom Tara had served for years. With the help of her family, classmates, and friends, we served over 1,500 meals. We have sponsored toiletry drives for 15 years to benefit the homeless in Baltimore. Sadly, those drives, toiletries from Tara, which generated 200 to 400 toiletry packages every year, were suspended this year because of the pandemic. Through a foundation established in Tara's memory, we have funded projects performed by youth and young adults in Maryland, which address social justice issues. Tara's life was and is focused on making lives better and safer for anyone whom she met or heard about. There are many things which should be done to make the roads in Maryland safer, such as requiring drivers approaching a malfunctioning traffic light to treat the situation as a four-way stop, and reminding people of the true definition of yield. Eliminating the possibility of malfunctioning traffic lights by using battery backups, as was done in Howard County soon after the accident, is certainly another one. Therefore, I support passage of House Bill 1147. And thank you for your time.
Mr. Howard, on behalf of the entire committee, we're very sorry for your loss. It's a shame that we have to learn from terrible tragedies like this, but we do learn. And all of us thank you for coming to our committee, offering your testimony, and for all the wonderful things you've done on behalf of the community in the name of your daughter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you. But I do want to emphasize Tara lived the second great commandment, to treat others as she wanted to be treated. And we try to do whatever we can in her memory because she's not here physically to do it anymore.
Well, thank you very much. Mrs. Howard, please, the committee welcomes you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Linda Howard. I've lived in my home state of Maryland the majority of my life. My husband and I were raised in Montgomery County and lived for the last 38 years in Howard County. We've raised two amazing children here, children who grew into caring, responsible, faith-filled adults and exemplary citizens. Well, for one of them, almost an adult. Our daughter, Teresa, whom we called Tara, age 18, was killed in an unnecessary and preventable traffic accident 15 years ago when the car in which she was a passenger was broadsided by a tractor trailer at the site of a malfunctioning traffic light at routes 95 and 175 in Howard County. The light was completely dark on all sides. Our Tara had the most beautiful smile, and everyone she ever met became her family or friend, from classmates and teammates to church youth group friends, from children she helped at Sarah's house to homeless people she helped feed in Baltimore City on Sunday afternoons for years. Tara was a gifted artist, as you can see behind me, and was studying graphic design in her first semester of college. She had started a social justice club at her high school and always involved others in helping when she helped. Tara left a legacy of serving others with more than 1,000 hours of community service during high school. Our family was changed forever that night. A father and mother with no daughter, a big brother whose wife was expecting their first child, with no little sister to enjoy her first niece. The world is missing Tara and all of the wonderful, caring things she would have continued to do if she had lived longer. It is also missing Scott Kaplan, a lively and charismatic 19-year-old killed that night in the same car. Two beautiful young people who had promising, living, and giving futures until that night at that traffic light. I firmly support House Bill 1147 to add battery backups to all traffic lights in the state of Maryland. Every person has value, and even one life saved will be worth it. Please vote favorably on this bill so other families will not be subjected to such a tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, on behalf of the entire committee, thank you for testifying. And it's a terrible shame that you have to do so under such circumstances. But we are very happy to have you with us here. We have a question from Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for Delegate Parrott for bringing this bill and bringing this important issue to our attention. And thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Howard, for coming out. And I'm really terribly sorry for your loss. I just had a question. I was looking at .SHA's letter, and they mentioned that they don't have the jurisdiction or the assets to be able to replace, to be able to upgrade the lights in city and municipality and county roadways. Does this bill require SHA to upgrade those, or does it provide grants to the counties to be able to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it does provide grants to the counties and municipalities so they can do that on their own.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the sponsor or any of the proponents of the bill? Seeing none, thank you very much. Thank you to the Howards, of course, and that will conclude the public hearing on House Bill 1147. Let's turn now to House Bill 1229, Delegate Lasanti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Delegate Marianne Lasanti for the record. It is my pleasure to present to you House Bill 1229, which monitorizes our public ethics filing for local officials by allowing electronic filing. This bill is long overdue and will promote efficiency and transparency. Moreover, with the inclusion of electronic filing of financial disclosures, local governments will be able to respond quickly to inquiries from the public and the Board of Elections to certify candidacies as requested. This bill is in the public's interest. House Bill 1229 will help address potential issues of conflict of interest in advance and support confidence in unbiased decision-making. I am also pleased to tell you that the fiscal impact note is 0. So I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1229. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Okay, Delegate Ruth, do you have your hand up from the last bill, or do you have a question? Okay, go ahead, ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill, I just wanted to clarify, it requires all disclosures to be filed electronically.
That's correct.
And so
in electronic format. And I'm not prescriptive about electronic format because in working with MML and MACO, we discussed it and it said it really isn't necessary for us to define that because that gives a lot of flexibility, particularly at the municipal level, for them to decide what that means within the scope of their particular their particular ordinance.
So was there any thought given to or any concern about people who might not have good internet access? I know, and particularly in rural areas, there's, often not good internet access. And how would somebody in an area like that, I guess they would have to go someplace where they can get internet access?
Cell phone. They could take a picture with their cell phone that would qualify, and they could send it in through their cell phone. I mean, that makes an electronic, that would qualify as an electronic submission. That's why I didn't go into any details as to as to defining that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the sponsor? Nobody else has signed up for or against the bill. Okay, in that case, you're free to go, Delegate Lasanti.
Thank you very much.
That concludes the public hearing on that bill, and we are waiting for Jay Walker. I'm texting him right now.
I'm here, man. What's up?
Oh, Skywalker, there he is. All right, Delegate Skywalker.
How you doing?
1297.
Thank you. First, for the record, I'm the
4
Delegate Jay
minutes.
Walker, District 26, bringing you House Bill 1297. Should be a quick bill to talk about. This bill, we have a highway in my district, which is named Indian Head Highway. Bill I put in a couple years ago, my daughter, when she was in elementary school, asked me, why is it fair to have a street named Indian Head? That's offensive. In doing some research and history on it, I discovered that it was offensive, and I thought about it. So the problem is, inclusive Native Americans and their body parts and the names of streets, roads, and highways is a discriminatory practice. And that's what the Indian tribe our way feels. The name Indian Head demonstrates a time when it was legal to kill American Indians and take their body parts and sell them. The Lumbee Chirrah tribe in Maryland states that their tribal and oral history describes the name of Indian Head coming from a time when Native Americans' heads were stuck on fence posts along the sides of the road in hostile white territories. They've tried to get this as road changed for 17 years. I thought the solution was, when I first came up, was serious putting this bill in, was changing the name to Marshall Highway, Thurgood Marshall Highway. There's somebody else that's a senator of Charles County is thinking about calling it the Obama Highway. Here's what I'm asking you all to do. Give us the ability to change the name, but give us the ability to have more community input on changing the name. Allowing the name to stay is not an acceptable solution. So I would think that, and the name I'm leaning towards now is called Piscataway Highway, which is a Piscataway tribe, which was located in that part of Southern Maryland, as well as Prince George's County. So by doing so, I think we take a negative and we turn it into a positive, and without erasing the history of the Native Americans that were in that district. I want to take it to the community and find out what the community name wants to be. And I think that's the right way to go, particularly in 2021. And with that being said, I didn't know if I had 2 minutes or not, so I started talking a lot of.
No, you have 4 minutes, but
I'll open it up to that. And the reason why I thought Thurgood Marshall would be good, because Thurgood Marshall is somebody that's prominent in Maryland history. We know that, and renaming 210 after Thurgood Marshall for what all he's done in the state. He's a Maryland native, and I think that was my thought process. But you can get no more native than the Piscataway tribe there in Southern Maryland. So with that being said, I ask you all to amend the bill. You can take the name out, but let's make the message clear. We're not going to allow that name Indian Head Highway to stand. Thank you.
Okay, we have questions for the sponsor. I guess the first one goes to Delegate Ruth, then Delegate Parrott, then Delegate Harrison.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Walker, for this bill. I just wanted to clarify that the MDOT letter talks about difficulties with changing the name of a road and suggests that it done as a dedication instead, but that wouldn't solve this problem, right? Because then it would still be called Indian Head.
Yep, and just not acceptable. I mean,
thank you.
Put a price tag on human rights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Parrott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Delegate. I just have a question about local control. Indian Head Highway, the way it is 210, it goes through Charles County and Prince George's County. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So if we gave to local control and we didn't assign a name in this committee, but we said that Prince George's and Charles County could work together to come up with a name, would that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, you could do that, but I think, there are roads that have several names. You go on your street and go somewhere, and we've got one Livingston Road, then the other side of the road becomes Palmer Road. I believe that we will come together on this, but I don't want anything that's going to hinder it at all. The key is just recognizing as a state that name needs to go, and we'll take it from there.
So you're thinking maybe Prince George's would have one name and Charles could have another name? Just leave it open.
They might want to do that, yeah. That may be the case. I mean, I know we feel pretty strongly in my community because we have a lot of waterfront property down there. So seems to be winning, but they may want to go with the Obama or whatever it may be. I don't know, but I would think if we can come together, that'd be great. But you never know what could happen. But let's take it to the people.
Very good. Well, I like the idea of local control. So.
Oh, man,
power
come
back
on, man. I ain't going there with you.
All right, Delegate. Thank you.
All right.
Delegate Harrison.
Thank you, Delegate Walker. Just last week, I received a call from a constituent who heard about the other bill, who happens to be a diversity manager in one of the federal government agencies, and was very concerned about naming it after, Barack Obama or whatever. And thought that it would really serve justice to rename it to the Native American, after a Native American, or to recognize the Native Americans who populated that area, and thought that that might be a more fitting memorial. And so because we have to phrase everything in this committee as a question, isn't that so?
That is so. And that's why I'm listening to the people out there. And like I said, I thought Marshall Highway was great. And but in listening to people, the Indians, they're minorities all throughout this country. And it would be easy and selfish for me to say, you know what, we're a majority Black community, we're going to keep it with a Black man. But that's the case that would happen all across America. And that's not fair the way we've treated Native Americans. So my thing is, it makes sense to me. When I heard Piscataway Highway, I loved it and said, hey, let's go that way. And I seem to be getting that positive feedback. So thank you for your question. And that's so.
Thank you.
You don't have to put your comments in the form of a question. Okay, Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Walker. This is a great bill. So going back to Delegate Parrott's point, does the current 210, does it go through just 2 counties, or is it 3? I was thinking it went further south. Is it just Prince George's?
No, yeah, it dead ends in the town of Indian Head. It goes from the DC border is where it becomes Indian Head Highway. Once you in past DC, it's not that's South Capitol Street. So it's actually in Prince George's County and Charles County specifically. And I'm saying majority of it is Prince. It may go 60-40 Prince George's.
Okay, and it goes by the same name throughout after it gets out.
And there's another street called, which we may, if you want to amend on to it, we can try and do that as well. Which will be a bill for next year. There's an old Indian Head Highway as well, which is drawing some attention as well.
And so going back to the idea of Piscataway, which I think is a wonderful idea, why not go ahead with that? Or did you just want to, what kind of response have you gotten? Or you want people to feel like they have, sort of input into the decision?
Sure. I'm not afraid to say, if you asked me to vote, I would say change to Piscataway Highway. However, when I thought Marshall Highway was a good idea, Piscataway came better, and I got that from the community, from the people. So rather than me, I'm not afraid to take a tough vote and say, hey, this is what we got. But I think in all fairness, it'd be right to, come together as a community, hear them all out, and let's see what takes place. But I'm going to lean Piscataway Highway.
Okay. So that is your suggestion, or you're asking for the feedback before you would find?
I don't think you can rename a highway overnight. So I think the key is sending that we're going to rename this highway.
Right.
There is a process, which I can't remember what that process is right now. I'm just going to have to re-research what that is.
That's what I was going to ask about, Mr. Chairman. How long does that take? Are we talking a year or more? Or?
I don't know, but I know that in the past, the legislature has hesitated to change names by bills, because then we'd get 1 million bills to do it. But there's, the suggestion. I mean, I had no idea that Indian Head Highway, that was the derivation of the name. I mean, that's really appalling. I mean, I had no idea until just now. So
I've heard something, Mr. Chairman. It's a weak defense, and they try to say that there was a head of land that stuck in the Potomac that was inhabited by Indians, and then that the tribe itself did the research and said that's not the case. So that being said, we need your help. I understand this committee has it sensitive with days and streets and all that stuff, but right thing. I don't think there would be any opposition towards doing the right thing here. And you got to think about it. When you're on 495, right before you cross into Virginia, the last G says Indian Head. It says Forest Heights, and then it says Indian Head. So let's get the ball rolling.
Yeah. Mary, are you good? Okay, Vaughn Stewart has a question.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, roll Tide on
Good to
this
see
bill.
you. Good to see you today. So I just wanted to first to just applaud you. I think this is awesome. I think Thurgood Marshall was a great idea, but I think your willingness to listen to the community with Piscataway, I think is an even better idea. So I just bravo overall, first of all. My only question just goes back to what Delegate Lehman and then the chairman were following up on, which is just how this works in process when we're considering the subcommittee amendments and the committee amendments. And my question is, I like the idea of giving the community a voice, but at the same time, I also don't want to get in a situation where the community can't decide or it's not clear who the decision maker is, and then we come back next session and the name hasn't been changed. So are you thinking it would be the Prince George's Council that would be granted authority under the bill?
No, I think it would be a matter of, what I plan on doing is going back and talking to the community and hosting town halls like we do for those communities. And I happen to represent all of that district in Prince George's County, all the way up to the Accokeek border, which the road runs through. So, I'll take it there. There's a petition right now. I'm sorry. Just, right now there's an organization called change.org, and they've already gotten over 2,100 signatures.
Wow.
To change this, the name of this road. And the leader in the clubhouse seems to be Piscataway Highway.
Got it. Okay. Well, I was just wondering, maybe, would you be open to something like on a certain date it becomes Piscataway unless, the community goes in a different direction. And then that way, at least we'd have a defined end date for when Indian Head is done. We have a default option. I don't know where the process works. If that really,
Well, I'll tell you what, let's have the subcommittee toss that around and come up with a nice crisp solution. I mean, I think that, I'm just speaking for myself. I'm pretty appalled by to know that is the sort of name etymology. I mean, Baton Rouge is in Louisiana is a very similar thing. I'm not going to describe what the etymology of that is, but it's similarly appalling, and you can Google it for yourself. But okay, well, I think that's it. Delegate Walker, thank you very much for bringing this to us.
I appreciate you all, and I want to give a shout out to my daughter Janine. So you can learn something from the millennials. So she brought it to me years ago. I didn't put up much fight, and like millennials, they don't put up with that type of stuff. So I'm standing with them. So I'm with you. Thank you.
And I just want to point out, Jay, that you came to my committee and you did not get stooped.
Okay, I got you, Kumar the Magnificent. Appreciate it.
Okay, see you.
I'll take care.
See you later, brother. Okay. Okay, so that ends the public hearing. But don't go away because A, we have announcements.